back to another episode of the MonkeyBoy Presents the DC Comics Superhero Collection by Eaglemoss. Today we have issue number 7 for you, Green Arrow. This is one of my favorite characters. It's actually one of my brother's favorite characters ever. He even has one of the original Kenner Super Friends figures with the little, you squeeze the legs and they have a little power action thing. So it's a great figure. I'm very excited to bring this one to you. Let's get started. We're going to go right into this. First, we'll go through, as usual, the magazine, covering everything you need to know about the character. And then, the figure itself. We'll look at it. The good, the bad, the ugly. And here we go. Right into DC Comics Superhero Collection, issue number 7, Green Arrow. The first section of the magazine, of course, deals with the character's origins. This time, of course, we have Green Arrow, a.k.a. Oliver Queen, or Ollie to his friends, and he's sort of the opposite of Batman. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, everything was handed to him, and he never really had to work for anything. He inherited a billion-dollar fortune, had a successful company, and was really a spoiled brat until one day, not wanting to be burdened with the stresses of running a billion-dollar company, he fled on his private yacht and encountered a storm that blew him off course, and he wrecked on a deserted island and was forced to live there on his own for months. But he had taken archery courses as a younger child and fashioned himself a crude bow and arrow, and that's how he lived and survived on this island, hunting and gathering until he was finally rescued. And after that, he devoted himself to helping those who couldn't help themselves. Shortly after his return to the mainland, he attended a costume ball where he was wearing a Robin Hood sort of costume, and there was a robbery going down at this costume ball, and he jumped in and saved the day. Nobody knew who it was underneath the mask, and they dubbed him Green Arrow, and he became the hero of Star City. The next couple of pages deal with the Green Arrow's supporting cast, starting first with his sidekick and ward, Roy Harper, also known as Speedy. We learn how the two met, how Roy became his ward and was later adopted by Ollie. We also learn a little bit about the storyline where Roy was revealed to be a heroin addict, this during the Green Arrow Green Lantern team-up. Which this section also details how the two traveled the country together for a little while and became very close friends during their travels. We also learn about the ladies in Ollie's life, most importantly Dinah Lance, also known as the Black Canary, a fellow Justice League member who is the love of Ollie's life and would eventually become his wife. In fact, Ollie was so madly in love with Dinah that he actually picked up and moved from Star City to Seattle with her, and for the first time in a very long time, his costume got a complete redesign. After a run-in with some local drug dealers left Dinah near death, Ollie made it his quest to bring them to justice, and along the way bumped into another heroine on the same mission, calling herself Shadow. The two actually fell in love and conceived a child together that Ollie didn't know about until much later in life. Shortly after his brief romance with Shadow, he went back to Dinah, but the two realized that it was just too tumultuous between them at the moment and they needed to take a break. And right after this, practically, he found that he had a long-lost son named Connor from a previous relationship he had had when he was just a very young man. Shortly after meeting Connor and bringing him on as his new sidekick, Ollie sacrificed himself to help avert a terrorist attack on Metropolis. He actually stayed dead for several years in the comic book world until finally his old pal Hal Jordan, who was now the Spectre, brought him back from the dead, and Ollie got a new lease on life and found a new purpose for himself as well. The last couple pages tell us basically what happened after his rebirth. He continued to patrol Star City with his son Connor, who is also known as Green Arrow. He adopted a new ward named Mia, who became the new Speedy, a female Speedy, which was pretty cool. He reconciled with Black Canary, and the two eventually married. He even served as mayor for a short time of his hometown of Star City. And to this day, he still patrols and protects it. Next up, the classic storyline section, giving us 3 of the best Green Arrow stories ever told. First up, we have the Hard Traveling Heroes storyline from the Green Lantern Green Arrow team-up of the 70s, and this is significant for 2 major reasons. Number 1, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, legends in the industry, took Ollie from an obscure Batman sort of wannabe character and made him his own, a unique individual hero within the DC universe, teaming him up with Hal Jordan. And the second reason it was so revolutionary was because they had these heroes do something no one had ever done before, and that was take on social issues at the time: racism, drug abuse, homelessness. No one had ever done anything like that, and since that time, many have tried to replicate it. Next up, we have the Longbow Hunters, and this is arguably the greatest Green Arrow story ever told. It made him a more gritty character, a more real character. He was moved out of the fictional Star City and into the real world of Seattle, and it was done under the guidance of writer and artist Mike Grell, and it's stunning to look at. It's a great read, definitely worth picking up. Quiver, which is basically Ollie's rebirth at the hands of his friend Hal Jordan, who was the Spectre at the time. And it was written by Kevin Smith with amazing artwork by Phil Hester, and really is just a fun, witty, entertaining read and a really unique way to bring the character back into the DC universe. Next up, we have Ollie's Allies and Enemies section. Of particular note is the Justice League Elite section right there. Also a really badass drawing of fellow Justice League member Hawkman. In Green Arrow's iconography section, we get a look at his arsenal, and this is just an extremely detailed and up-close look at the many and varied trick arrows that the Green Arrow employs in his fight against crime. We have Ollie's original thinking section, which talks about the other sharpshooters in his life. It touches on one of his arch-villains, known as Merlin, but mostly focuses on his allies, dealing with Connor Hawke, his son, Arrowette, and both versions of Speedy, the current Speedy Mia, and the original Speedy, now known as Red Arrow, Roy Harper. I love this figure. This is another one of my favorites in the line, especially so far this early on. The detail on Ollie here is great, really great. I love the colors of green. In fact, the lighter, what I would call emerald green on him almost, is sort of the green I envision for Green Lantern, honestly. So yeah, and the darker green, it's great. His blonde hair, down to the mask, down to the feather in his cap. It's actually feathered, if you can believe that, to give it an even more feathery kind of look, you know? I guess it makes sense. His bow and everything. He's even got the G right there on his belt, which looks great. Everything about him, really, really nice. His quiver and everything, with all those arrows, and each one has some detail. There's not a whole lot bad on mine. A couple little blotches of paint here and there that are a little out of place, but I don't mind those sorts of things really overall, because it tells me it's hand painted, you know, it's handcrafted. As long as it's not awful, it's not terribly ugly, sort of, you know. Really the worst one so far that we've seen is the Green Lantern one with the blotchy silver here and there. That's the worst I've seen, but really that's not awful. It just tells me it's hand done, you know, it's done by somebody, so it's great. Anyway, more pictures here in just a second, but I love this figure. As with all the other figures, Arrow stands atop the DC logo, and on the underside of the base is his name in a couple languages along with the serial number. And for the heck of it, I took a picture of him with his old friend, Green Lantern. So what else is there to say about this figure? I mean, really, it's a great interpretation of the Green Arrow. I'm so glad they went with this version of the costume. I think this is the costume that most everyone thinks of when they think of the Green Arrow, not the Golden Age one with the clean-shaven face and the red cap and gloves and all that. This is who I think of when I think of Green Arrow, honestly. This is the Ollie I think of. So here we go, the good. The attention to detail is spectacular. There are multiple shades of green here. His bow is different from his tights, is different from his vest, is different from his quiver, is different from the feather in his cap. It's so many different shades of green, it doesn't even come across here. The feathering in his cap, the ends of every arrow. I mean, it's fantastic, the level of detail. The bad, just a blotch of paint on mine between his quiver and his back. It's flesh toned, it looks like it just bled a little, but I like that because, again, it shows that it's handcrafted, and overall, there's really nothing else bad on it. Other bad things I've heard of is the bow actually being broken in the packaging, and it is kind of fragile, so you have to be careful with that. Also, the arrow that he's drawing, that can be a little bit fragile too. It's easily broken. The ugly, nothing really on my figure. I think he's a great addition. Really happy they brought him out. And I'm really happy you guys are tuning in to check these out. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next one. It's one I've been dying to get to. There's a short teaser for that coming up. Once again, thank you all so much for watching.